Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Pastor Todd Summer. I pastor at Faith and Victory Church in Auburn, Washington, and I'm reading the Bible every single day of the year. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get into it. Well, today we have a little bit of Mark, a little bit of 2 Samuel, and a little bit of Daniel. Mark 8, 1 through 21. Jesus feeds the 4,000. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. His disciples answered, But where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke it and gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present. After he had sent them away, he got into a boat and his disciples went to the region of Dalmanthua. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus to test him. They asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Then he left, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. The yeast of the Pharisees and Herod. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisee and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, It is because we have no bread. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? As your hearts hardened? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12, they replied. And I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000. How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. He said to them, Do you still not understand? 2 Samuel 19. Joab was told, The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom, and the whole army. The victory that day was turned into mourning, because on that day the troops heard it said, The king is grieving for his son. The men stole into the city that day, as men steal in who are ashamed of when they flee from battle. The king covered his face and cried aloud, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. Then Joab went into the house of the king and said, Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders of their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would have been pleased if Absalom were alive today and then all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. Then this will be worse for you than all the calamities you have come on you from your youth till now. So the king got up and took his seat in the gateway. When the men were told the king is sitting in the gateway, they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. David returns to Jerusalem. Throughout all the tribes of Israel, all the people were arguing among themselves, saying, The king has delivered us from the hands of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hands of the Philistines. But now he has fled the country to escape from Absalom, and Absalom, whom we anointed ruler over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back? King David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Ask the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back into his palace, since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king at his quarters? You're my relatives, my own flesh and blood. So why should you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, Are you not my own flesh and blood? May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you are not the commander of my army for life in place of Joab. He won over the hearts of men of Judah so that they were all of one mind. They sent the word to the king, Return, you and all your men. Then the king returned, and when his far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out to meet with the king and bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahuriam, hurried down with the men of Judah to greet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites, along with Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan, where the king was. They crossed at the ford to take the king's household over and do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, May the Lord not hold me guilty. Do you remember how your servants did wrong on the day my lord le- left my lord the king left Jerusalem? May the king put it out of his mind, for I your servant know I have sinned. But today I have come here as the first from the tribes of Joseph to come down and meet the Lord my king. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed. David replied, What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? What right do you have to interfere? Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Don't I know that today I am king over Israel? So the king said to Shimei, You must not die. And the king promised him on oath. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet, or trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day the king returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth? He said, My lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and I will ride on it, so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me, and he slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever you wish. All my grandfather's descendants deserve nothing but death from my lord the king. But you gave your servant a place among those who eat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king? The king said to him, Why say more? I ordered you and Ziba to divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, Let him take everything now that my lord the king has returned home safely. Barzillai the Gileadite also came down to Rogelim to cross the Jordan with the king and to send him on his way from there. Now Barzillai was very old, 80 years of age. He had provided for the king during his stay at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, Cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem, and I will provide for you. But Barzillai answered the king, How many more years will I live that I should go to Jerusalem with the king? I am now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear the voices of male and female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Your servant will cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance, but why should the king reward me in this way? Let your servant return, that I may die in my own town near the tomb of my father and mother. And here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with the lord the king. Do for him whatever you wish. The king said, Kimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him whatever I wish, and anything you desire from me I will do for you. So all the people crossed the Jordan, and then the king crossed over. The king kissed Barzillai and bid him farewell, and Barzillai returned to his home. When the king crossed over to Gilgal, Kimham crossed with him. All the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel had taken the king over. Soon all the men of Israel were coming to the king and saying to him, Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men? All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, We did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you angry about it? Have we eaten of any of the king's provisions? Have we taken anything for ourselves? The men of Israel answered the men of Judah, we have 10 shares in the king, so we have a greater claim on David than you have. Why do you treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king? But the men of Judah pressed their claim even more forcefully than the men of Israel. Daniel 12, the end times. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood before me two others, one on this bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river lifted his right hand and left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times and a half a time. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. I heard but did not understand, so I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go on your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the end time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one and who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. As for you, go on your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days, you will rise up to receive your allotted inheritance. Amen, amen, amen. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. I would also really appreciate a like and a comment on this video. Have a great day, and God bless.